Hello, and welcome to the H.O.W podcast. Once again, we're really excited to be here with you today. My name is Jonathan, and I'm really excited because we have our other hosts for the podcast today, and we also have a special guest. So, to get things started today, I just want to thank everybody that has been watching the podcast. We've been getting, a lot of comments and good feedback on some of the episodes, and we really appreciate you guys for listening in, for tuning in, whether you do it on YouTube or any of the podcast apps. So thank you very much for that, and also feel free to always email us at thehowpodcast1@gmail.com if you have any questions that you would like to ask, or any comments that you would like to share with us as well. With me today, I have our good friend Levi. What's up, Levi? How you doing, man?
Yo, man, what's up? How are you guys? God bless you. Like Jonathan said, we're super grateful for y'all's feedback, for the comments. We just want to encourage y'all to continue sharing. You never know who in your friends list, whoever you have added in your social media could be blessed by this content. So that's our intention, is to be a blessing. So share it. If it was a blessing to you, it's for sure going to be a blessing to somebody else that's also involved in praise and worship, or somebody that is wanting to get themselves involved in praise and worship. So we're wanting to reach out to that group of people as well. So we're excited for this episode today. And yeah, I'm all good. Christian, how are you, brother?
Hey everyone, it's good to be here again. And it's been every episode is special, so this is no different. And I'm really happy for our new guests. I'm pretty sure one of you guys are going to introduce our new guest today. But just before we do that, we're getting those tough questions just for you. We're going to give you a hard time, and I'm all about that in this episode. So you better be ready. But on a serious note, yeah, we're gonna talk about a little bit something that that we've been on the worship world go through most of the time. So it's pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to see what we discuss today.
Definitely. Yeah, man. So I would actually like to introduce our guest, but before I do, also we've been getting like really great comments as well about the Spanish episodes that we've dropped. If you guys really like the Spanish episodes as well, let us know in the comments below. And we'll try to accommodate more guests that are Spanish speaking, right? To because we've definitely. I mean, I've had a couple of friends of mine tell me about it. We're kind of torn, right? We're kind of torn, trying to figure out, English or Spanish, what works best for everybody. But today we have a special guest that speaks both fluently. He is known
The bachelor of the alien worship.
yeah, not a bachelor anymore, but yeah.
Especially German.
Yeah. He is known as a professional pupusa eater in the in the Salvadorian worlds. And no, man, our guest from today it's a very personal friend of mine. He also happens to be my brother-in-law, so we're very close. And I would just like to introduce to you Exar Sandoval, who's with us today. Go ahead, Exar.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Doing pretty
It's
good,
going.
man. Excited to have you here,
Great,
man.
great. Hey, it's truly a blessing and honor to be with you guys. This podcast has been a big blessing to myself and my wife's, and I'm hoping that in this instante we can also provide some words and some wisdom, and hopefully this podcast could be a blessing to those that are listening to as well. And I don't know about being fluent in both languages. I think one of the things I like about this podcast is it gives us the liberty to be kind of like go either way, kind of like I'm fluent in Spanglish. My English is terrible and my Spanish is terrible. So
Yeah.
the good thing is I can kind of navigate both those and kind of pick words from different languages.
Yeah. So Exar. So why don't you tell everyone, like some the people that who don't know you, a little bit of your background, where you've been learning music, which is your passion, tell us a little bit about yourself before we go
Yeah,
on.
yeah, for sure. Well, right now I congregate in the Iglesia de Elim in Oklahoma City. I work alongside Jonathan and hermano Pastor Willie Aldana there. So I've been there for about a good, I'd say about 10 years now. But I started out when I was 12 years old in a small church in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma. And I started playing drums when I was 12. And ever since then, I've just been really passionate about music. I think that the initial part of my walk in the gospel and in the worship industry has always been kind of fueled by music. As when you're a kid, you understand the concept of God and you understand, little bits and pieces about worship and praise, but your main driving force is music. The excitement of playing different beats, of playing songs, of playing alongside your friends. So when I was younger, I played drums and that was like one of my passions. And then I moved on to bass. One of the things about being in a small church is you kind of have to be a jack of all trades. The bass player doesn't show up and they put you on the bass, and that's kind of how I moved around a lot in church. One time, the piano player kind of got mad and he left church and they found out that I knew about 3 chords in the piano and I was playing the next Tuesday. And I was just up there sweating. I knew those 3 chords and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with these three chords, but we're gonna try to make it happen. And, thus far, God has been good and me ha dado la habilidad de poder progresar. And now we're here working alongside, Jonathan and the team there in Oklahoma. And it's just a blessing, being part of a worship team. And, it's definitely a big passion for me because music is it's just never ending, man. You're always going to get to a point, you're never going to get to a point where it's like, I've learned everything, it just keeps on evolving. And yeah, that's pretty much it, just kind of short and sweet.
Yeah, man. No, like, so whenever you guys hear me voice my frustrations about musicians at church, this is the guy that I'm mostly talking about. Okay, it's not. But so, dude, like, you've had the experience of playing at small churches, like you said, in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, but you'd also had the experience of playing at big churches, like in Orlando, Florida, right? And Los Angeles,
Right.
California, right? So, what do you say is like the biggest difference in between worship teams in those churches?
I think it's more of a, I don't want to say less personal, but in some sense there's some, I feel like your praise is more uh scheduled. And I say that in a sense that, in the big church, there's a lot of factors that come into play. There's a praise team, there's, production teams that are all working on the worship experience per se. So, you're allotted about 20 minutes of praise and worship, then, this person goes up and I want to say a little bit more organized, a little bit more strict on schedule. So it doesn't give you the ability to just go with the flow per se. You're always on a certain time, you're on a certain schedule. We would be giving these, like sheet music. We would follow those sheet music, and then, I feel like I don't want to say it was like more like a business transaction, but these things were like pretty much on a cadence per se. And then in small churches, because that organization isn't necessarily there, it gives us a lot of freedom to just praise more freely. We have many services in our church where the schedule is kind of thrown out the window, and sometimes all praise and worship, or sometimes, los tiempos se extienden, and it's we're open to that because we're a small church. Being a big church, I think that they're a little bit more strict on things like schedule and what the other groups are trying to do as well. As far as like the praise team, um, I'm not sure if you ever heard of I'm sure you heard it, but hay un dicho en español que dice iglesia pequeña y infierno grande, right? And I say that in a sense that you're held accountable for more things. The responsibility is a lot bigger. If you're in a smaller worship team, you guys have all noticed that, perhaps there's times where your guitar player is missing or your drummer's missing and your bass player is missing, and then you're just alone with, two cantoras and just piano and maybe some pads in the background, and that's the way the culto has to go. So there's different challenges on both sides. On the smaller churches, like I think your time there is more intimate. But in bigger churches, la carga es compartida entre muchas personas. So
Yeah,
I think there's pros and cons to both of them.
yeah, totally. I think I like small
Man,
churches though.
I So small churches, I feel like I've heard that a lot, and I think this will be a good way to introduce as, something that we want to talk about today. So I feel like Exar made a good point earlier in his experience with the participating in the worship ministry in a small church. Sometimes what you have is all you have. You don't have the luxury of counting with more than one drum player, more than one director, etc. in every area. Sometimes what you have is what you have, and the people that are there are volunteering their time and they do it out of love. And something that we can be affected by, and I'm sure this could apply not just in a small church level, but, it could apply in a big church level, but maybe it's a little bit more noticeable in a small church level, and that is spiritual burnout. Maybe feeling like you are in a routine per se. You already know what to expect. You already know who's gonna be there, right? You already know who's gonna play this, who's gonna play that, who's gonna direct, and you can get into what's called algo rutinario, decimos en español. And when we get into that, then we could get ourselves into some trouble spiritually. And I want to bring us to a passage that I was reading in let me pull it up here in Ezekiel, and I'm just going to read it real quick to be able to see what we want to talk about today. Ezekiel 44:17, and this is the Lord speaking into the Levites. It says, when they enter the gateway to the inner courtyard, they must wear only linen clothing. They must wear no wool while on duty in the inner courtyard or in the temple itself. In verse 18, they must wear linen turbans and linen undergarments. They must not wear anything that could cause them to perspire, meaning to sweat. And if there's something that we've been taught in the ministry, is that like in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 11 says, all of the things that happened in the time of law happened as a prefigurative. It literally says that in 1 Corinthians 10:11, historical events that were written down for a warning to us that are living in these times of the church. And so what I take from that is that our responsibility in the church, our privilege per se, should not cause us any, should not be something that causes us any stress, should not be something que nos canse. Por eso decía que las vestiduras que el sacerdote se ponía no podía causarle sudor, cansancio. We could interpret it like that. So, guys, what do you think is a way for us in a small church level, but speaking in general, because I'm not just saying this conversation is exclusive to us who minister in a small church, but that is the majority of the people. How do you overcome that spiritual burnout? What can we do to make sure that this does not become a routine and we can come back to the first love? What are y'all's comments on this?
I'm gonna let Exar go first on this one.
No, I think it's happened to a lot of us. Yeah, it's happened to a lot of us, and I'm gonna like in a sense of opening my heart out to you guys. Being in small churches, there's been times where earlier in my walk or when I was dirigiendo, when I first started, there was times where I would go to church and I would use the same list from the previous service, and in my mindset was like, man, I don't want to do this, and I'm just gonna go in there, I'm gonna sing this, y que salga el culto. I just want to get this done with, and then go down and just basically do that, right? And there was a lot of times where I felt that, and I think it happens because I think we're all human, we're all human, and we definitely need to basically analyze ourselves and primero darnos cuenta, like, hey, I'm in a funk right now. I'm kind of down. I'm not echándole todas las ganas. Maybe at some point in my life or some point in my walk, and maybe just not in the worship ministry, but my walk in the gospel, I was more motivated and there was more of a passion. And now I'm just kind of going through the motions. So it definitely is something that's happened to me. I'm not sure if any of you guys. And I think some of the things that I started reading in the scripture was different people that went through similar situations, and I started to kind of read and just analyze, what do they do or what happened to these people that were going through these tough times, and who better to look at in the worship ministry or someone que quiera ser un adorador que la vida de David, and we look at David and we see that his walk in Christ and his walk in his whole ministry and as being a king and all that. There's many times in the book of Psalms where he's writing these beautiful messages and these song choruses and verses where he's like, God, que ¿dónde están los que me persiguen? And you see, like, he writes down a lot of his struggles. He talks about, cuando yo estoy siendo perseguido, when I'm feeling down, Jehová es mi pastor. And you see, like, he starts praising Jesus. And I started thinking about, or actually I have a book right here that Christian recommended to me. And thanks, Christian. It's been a real big help. But there's a book that talks about exploring worship, and this one's by Bob Sorge. And whenever the book starts off, it talks about the aspect of praise, the praise, alabanza. And I know that we're kind of seen as el grupo de alabanza, el grupo de adoración, the praise team, the worship team. Well, as I read more into this book, I saw that, praise and worship isn't necessarily instruments, isn't necessarily the act of, going up there and singing your list and then coming back down. Praise is an action. Praise is algo que uno hace. And I think in English, it's a little bit less solemne. In Spanish, is alabanza. And you think, oh, yo no puedo alabar a nadie en solo a Dios. But then in English, praise is a more commonly used word. Well, it's in my vocabulary anyways. For instance, I just recently got a dog not too long ago. And in the portion of me wanting to train her, a lot of books or a lot of videos that I would read or watch or tutorials, they would say, whenever the dog does something good, praise them. And I was like, no, I only praise Jesus, But then at the very core of it all, praise is basically just recognizing or acknowledging something that was done well or something that's good. For instance, whenever you're at a graduation or you're with a friend and something positive happens and you clap or you say, yes, good job, or, keep going. Those are forms of praises. Those are something that you're giving some kind of action for in response to something good. So when we think about that, this book talked about how praise is an action that we show towards Christ, that lets him know there's some kind of gratitude or something good that we feel towards him, And then as I started reading more, it talks about like como, alabanzas a Jehová, como aplaudir, how to, cantar sus alabanzas or decir sus alabanzas, like Dios tú eres grande. That's a form of praise. And then I started diving deeper in the book, and it talks about how praise shouldn't be something that flows from an emotion. Our job as people, our jobs as beings, as creatures of God, is to praise, whether we want to or not. And this is where I come back to David. David, there's a time in his life where he was like, Alma mía, alaba al Señor. And I think about that, and I'm like, was there a time in David's life where perhaps he didn't feel like doing that? Perhaps that praise wasn't readily available in his tongue or in his mouth or in his mind. It's like almost thinking he forgot to praise. Maybe he was going through a tough time in his life. Maybe he was feeling down, and he came to realize, hey, I'm not giving God the praise that he deserves. And it's not dependent on my emotion or how I feel. It's just what I am. Or just what I should be doing. Todo lo que respire alaba Jehová. Everything that is in the world, that is in existence, should be praising God, whether they feel like it or not. And then as I walked further, I started reading further into this book. It was kind of ironic because I felt like the question was, what do I do when I don't want to praise? And the answer is, you should praise. It's kind of like a real funny answer because you're like, I don't want to praise. Like, you have to praise. And I think once we start praising, once we start thinking, all right, I don't want to praise, but I know that God's been good in my life. I know that God's given me a family. He's given me safety. He's given me a job. He's given me so many blessings. And as we start counting all the good things that God is, that's where we kind of break free from that funk. Because then I know that there's times where maybe throughout the week I was down. And then I look at myself, I'm like, why am I feeling like this? You know, why don't I want to praise? Why don't I want to go to church? God has been good to me. God has been good to my family. He's shown his love to me. And as I start praising, as then I start bringing all these things to memory, come Friday, I'm excited. I'm at church and I'm like, God, I want to praise you now. I want to bring you this este sacrificio de alabanza. You know, his word says, entrad a sus puertas con acción de gracias. And that esa acción de gracias should be the fuel to nuestra alabanza, you know, and it could help us kind of break out of that funk, you know, because a lot of times I think in our daily walk, it's easy to forget. You know, we have jobs, we have all the stresses in life, and you know, we have families, and I think God knew that, or Jesus knew that we were going to go through these tough times. You know, like even in David dijo cuando aunque pase por valle de sombra y muerte. And that's where, if you look at how that sentence is structured, he says, nunca voy a pasar en un valle de sombra de muerte. He's like, cuando pase, like eventually it's going to happen. You know, I'm going to go through a time where perhaps everything's not coming out how I want it to come out. Maybe, you know, the praise team or the group around us isn't, you know, going at full capacity, or I don't feel the help of the people around me, you know. And even though that time or that happens, I know I can, you know, count on God, and you know, the praise has to be there. Praise is, I think, something that can really help us kind of break out of that funk. That's the best way I can describe it, like that funk, you know, when you're just down and out and not really able to give it your all.
Yeah, it's just there's such an importance for us to, you know, when we are in church, because we also have secular responsibilities, jobs, families, things that stress us out throughout the day. We got to remember that whenever we are ministering, we are imparting, you know, and so it is very important that we take the opportunity of the presence of God as people of the current priesthood who minister in the altar, to remember the benefits that there are in the house of the Father. I'm so surprised of the oldest son in the prodigal son, the parable that Jesus gave. Of the older son, that at the very end of the story, he was like, you know, Father, how you've never given me the opportunity to host a party with my friends, you know, but you're doing it for this guy that didn't value, you know, your possessions. And the point is that he was in the house of the Father, but he didn't know uh, to take advantage of the things that were in the house of the Father. So us as people who minister in the altar, we forget that of the benefits that there are in the house of the Father. And one of the biggest benefits that we have is His presence, is those opportunities that we have as we enter through the gates. Is the moment that we need to take to descargarnos, decirle, Señor, he tenido un tiempo frustrante, I've had a long day, Lord, la suegra, no es cierto, you know, I'm just having a tough life, my boss, you know, this, that, and take the opportunity to descargarnos. Porque why are we burdened so much? Porque no nos descargamos. Why, you know, it's just as simple as that. And so we forget that we also need to have that opportunity to tell, of surrender, and tell them, Lord, you know, here's my burden, please take it. And we're speaking on a smaller church level to some, you know, to where sometimes you have to minister in every service and you don't have the opportunity to receive with the people. If not, you would use the opportunity, you know, that you're not exercising your privilege to receive and have that moment of intimacy with God during the service. But because we're speaking like mainly like a small church level where you're pretty much ministering in every service, when are you going to have that moment? You know, you need to find those moments to where you need to also present yourself unto God and and tell Him, Lord, I'm about to minister. I don't want to impart frustration. I don't want to impart a sadness, anxiety over your congregation, over your people. So, Lord, here's my anxiety. Here's my frustration. Take it, because and give me the strength to be able to positively minister unto you. You know, because at least in my, from a personal experience for me now, I'm having to minister every service. every service, every service. So we have to find those moments of intimacy with the Lord, those one-on-ones with the Lord, even those one-on-ones with our pastor as well, to minister ourselves. It is so important to do that. If not, we're just going to keep on carrying a frustration, and the burden is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's going to reflect in the way we minister. And it's happened to me, and I get called out for it. Like my mom was like, ¿Qué te pasó, güey? No fluiste. ¿Por qué te quedaste callado? ¿Qué tenés? Algo tenés. ¿Qué te pasó? And she calls me up, because it reflects even in the way you minister, in the way you play your instrument, that there's something going on. Christian, what do you think, brother?
Well, again, we're having a conversation, so I'm gonna try to, like Exar said, I'm gonna try to open my heart and tell you guys what I think. So I think this, this ends up being a relationship with the Lord. And if you think about it, so for example, me, I've been married for almost 10 years, and married guys out there, you know what I'm talking about when I say routine hits hard sometimes. There's a lot of repetition throughout the day, from Monday through Friday, and it's really hard to disconnect in the weekend because you have this inertia going on because of the routine. There's a lot of things that you do over and over again. And 5 years in the marriage, 6 7 years in the marriage, you would expect for your significant other to just cope with it. Like, hey, we're married. What do you expect from me? I'm doing my part. You're supposed to do your part. Let's just go ahead and let's just take it in, right? Like, we're supposed to do this. But at the end, after a lot of conversations, talking the matters out, not leaving anything out in the open for the enemy to take advantage of. After having conversations with your couple, you realize that you need to have some breaks and some kind of interruptions and do these routines and kind of switch it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and have some dinner, every Wednesday. Let's switch it up a little bit and get out of this routine. Or this weekend, let's go ahead and leave the kids somewhere else, and let's have a romantic date again. So kind of remembering back, like Levi was saying, our first love. So I'm thinking, not only in worship, but in any aspect of our service in our ministry, I think we need to
Mm-hmm.
have these breaks in routines. I know that at some point we might think, like I was saying before, hey, this is my role, and significant other, this is your role. Let's not complain. Let's just keep doing it. But at the end, it is a relationship. It is a love relationship, and we're supposed to put a little bit of spiritual romantic stuff, if I may, into the formula. So um, I was reading on the book of Matthew how Jesus was saying, whenever you pray, do not do it like hypocrites. Like, they start repeating a lot of words, thinking that because of doing that, they will be heard. So I was thinking, okay, so you don't like repetition in that way. I get it. And then when you read Revelations, you have this celestial beings
Right.
surrounding the throne of
Day and night.
God day and
Mm-hmm.
night, just singing holy, holy, holy. Okay, that's all right. So we have another repetition here, but you like this one. So what's the difference? So for me, it goes to, again, who we are. So we are not four celestial special beings created for that purpose only. We were created to His image, to His to His resemblance. We are different. We're a special creation. We are created to be, or at least that's what we've been taught to. We have to long to be the bride of the Lamb of God. So we're different. We're supposed to have this spice, this kind of charm in this relationship. We're supposed to be the bride of the Lamb. So imagine, uh, I don't know, guys. Imagine a conversation with your wife. How long is it gonna take for you? How many years is it gonna take for you to say, "Oh man, I know what she's gonna say," or I know where she's going, and we're gonna end up fighting. at the end, it's supposed to be a growth. It's supposed to be a progress between both one end of the relationship and the other. So I think God is expecting for us
Mm.
to progress in a repetition in a way that we're surprising him at some point. I know this probably doesn't make any sense, but I think he likes for us to spice it up a little bit, especially with when he's been giving us talents to do so. He loves the multiplication of talents, and he loves a special way of repetition in his worship. So, routines, I think we must break them, and the way for me, the way to break them is by progressing with our talents, progressing in our relationship with God. Even the words that we use in our prayers, they have to be progressing every single time, we approach to His presence. We start being little babies in the gospel. We start growing as little kids, and then we mature. We're not supposed to be using the same words to our God. It's going to be a constant progress. And I think if there's no progress, like in any relationship, with couples, any marriage, if there's no progress, routine is just going to kill the whole thing eventually. And you're going to grow tired. You're going to grow desperate. And if there's not communication and there's no, transparency and openness, things go downhill. I think a relationship with God, our service, our ministry is kind of the same way. There needs to be communication with Him, openness, and we need to understand that we need to progress as well, or routine is going to kill us at some point, even our ministry. But I don't know what you guys think.
I want to briefly add on to what, and hopefully complement what Christian was saying. There's a saying, there's a secular saying, right? Don't bring work home, meaning don't bring, like your work frustrations into your house, or else, it's like almost your house needs to be like a place of refuge. A place where you literally don't need to bring all that stress over, or else it's gonna overall affect the atmosphere of your home. You're gonna bring that frustration home, and you're gonna frustrate your partner, your kids, etc. And I find it really interesting
Absolutely.
in the exact same verse that I started off in what was it, Ezekiel 44:17. If you read in verse 19, guys, this is really interesting because it continues to speak on the garments of the priest, and it literally, God is telling the priest, when you guys exit the temple, when you guys exit, the tabernacle, leave, take off your clothes, the ones that you wore while ministering to me. It says there in verse 19. And then they must leave them in the sacred rooms and put on different clothes. And it gives you the reason. And it says, so they might not endanger anybody. And I like it in Spanish, as well, because, and this is in Spanish, I'm reading the NTV version. Dice, no vayan a ser que vayan a poner a nadie en peligro. And so I think part of this is also is learning to phase out. There was something I learned from my dad when he was teaching, in our many conversations that we had when he was still with us. And he was like, vos, Levi, tienes que aprender a ser ministro cuando tienes que ser ministro, pero ser esposo cuando te toca ser esposo. Hay tiempo para todo. And he put as an example el ser que hay en el cielo que tiene 4 rostros. Tiene cara de hombre, águila, león y de siervo. Es decir que hay tiempo que nosotros tenemos que poner la cara de siervo, como de ministro, de servicio, de entrega total. Hay tiempo de ser león, de ser valiente, ir delante, ¿verdad? En una guerra espiritual. Tiempo de ser águila, subir a las alturas en un momento de intimidad con el Señor. Pero también hay tiempo de que tenemos que ser hombre, Y cuando toca ser hombre es estar en la casa. Interact with your wife, like Christian was saying, change it up a little bit. Don't bring the routine to your house either, or else that's gonna kill off the atmosphere of unity that you have in your home. So it's just learning to phase out. When it's your turn to be a minister, un siervo, be a siervo, and be a really good one, a best one as you can. you know. Pero cuando te toque ser, you know, hombre, be one and genuine as possible as well. That's just what I had to add on to that.
Yeah, that's great, man. Man, I was honestly, when Christian started talking about having a routine after being married for so many years, I was afraid he's going to say that you could have multiple wives to spice it up a little bit. But I'm glad he didn't go that route. He went with something a little bit more conservative, and I really appreciate that. No, man, but yeah, I don't know, man. For like, for me personally, man, like when Exar was saying like how David felt, man, I think we've all been in that position before, right? Where you feel defeated, and it's funny, man, because the perspective of people that are not on the worship team, it's always like, oh man, the guys in the worship team are like at a different level, right? They're like all this like maybe even like holy people that we look up to, right? And the reality of the things is that we are not, and we're flawed, and probably even more so than people down there. You know what I mean? And the only difference that we have from them is, I mean, it's literally a question of 2 feet from being on an altar, right? But we're the same. We're the same people, man. And I think we've all struggled, and we've all felt like David, where like we just feel, you know, defeated, right? And for me, man, usually like Exar was saying, man, like what helps him to get back into that flow is just to be grateful about the things that he's noticed in his life, right? For me, man, I've noticed that whenever I lose or I lose interest, or I feel like I'm not, you know, giving my 100%, it's always because I've neglected my relationship with the Lord, and that is probably 99% of the case for me. Like every single time that I feel down is because of that. Like I've neglected it, right? And I was remembering, man, like you know, before Passover, and the Lord told Moses, like, hey, make sure that you guys go all inside of your houses and eat the lamb inside in your house with your family, right? And sometimes, man, we forget to have that relationship, that personal relationship with the Lord in our houses, with our family, by ourselves, and we want to go out to the church and pretend we have this beautiful relationship with the Lord, but we have not eaten the lamb at home. And that's, I mean, honestly, I see countless people
That's good.
Do that every single time in the worship team, right? Like, oh, you know, my relationship with the Lord is Fridays from 7:30 to 8:30 whenever we have services at the church, right? And like I think we've touched this topic before in other podcasts, but your relationship with the Lord as a worship leader should be something that happens constantly every single day, at every single hour, right? Like with Exar was saying, like you're feeling down, praise. You're feeling happy, praise. You're feeling thankful, praise, right? And we get out of that mentality because of the secularity of our lives, right? Because of work, because of college, because of the wife, you know, whatever it is, right? But we sometimes lose that, we lose sight of what's important. Me estoy ministrando. I'm just kidding. No. I'm happily married.
We're gonna have a lady in the future here to balance things out.
Pass me some Kleenex, man. I'm feeling sad. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just saying that, you know, the secularity of our lives, man. It makes us forget that our relationship with the Lord happens at home. And dude, it's almost like clockwork, right? I stop praying, I stop, you know, having intimacy with the Lord. I start feeling tired. I start feeling burdened. And like what Levi said, right? Your undergarments that are not linen, you know, you start wearing like 100% cotton, right? And it starts getting really hot in there. You start sweating. And that's not what he wants from us. Decía Jesús, decía, venid a mí todos los que estén trabajados y cargados que yo os haré descansar, right? So he's telling us like, I don't want you to be tired and burdened, porque decía, mi yugo es fácil y ligera es mi carga, right? So why sometimes do we feel like, oh my gosh, this is so much to take, when it should be like Exar was saying, like whenever we do it is when I feel the lightest, right? Not the heaviest or the time with the most burden, but when I'm praising and worshiping is the time that I feel the best, right? And oftentimes we don't get to that point, man. And it's crazy, man, because like especially in small churches that can happen a lot too, right? We feel overwhelmed by all of the things that we need to do, right? The other day we were talking to this kids from the chat that we have with a bunch of worship leaders and stuff, and they were asking me like, what do you do at church? And I was like, dude, I do everything, you know what I mean? Like from running like the security group to sonido to lead worship to contar ofrendas to like do all that stuff, man. And it can be, if we look at it from with a human eye, it can be very tiring. But when we have a relationship with the Lord that actually makes us feel like, oh man, I'm actually should be thankful that I have the opportunity to do all of this, then your perspective starts changing. But I mean, so Exar, you've dealt with like a lot of small churches and some churches even smaller than ours, right? What do you think the mentality is for the musicians there? Because I know you dealt with like groups with like 2-3 people, right? And for a long time, I remember you actually were in one of those groups where it's literally like the same musicians playing every single day too, right? So how did you feel about that?
Yeah, and it, yeah. There was times in those situations where I'll be honest, I felt tired, and in a sense that I felt like I was just going through the motions, and part of it has to go back to the point where it's like praise, and when I think about it, it's like there was times where I'd go up, I'd go minister, I'd come back down, and I kind of felt bad about myself. I was like, man, I didn't give my all. Why didn't I give it my all? ¿Cómo no puedo alabar a Dios when He has been so good in my life? But then there's also a different aspect. We're all of us here in some capacity have been in some kind of leadership place, where we're in charge of a group or we're overseeing some kind of department. And we know that there's struggles when we're working with people, and sometimes we hold them to a certain standard that they're not always meeting. Perhaps, we've all had younger kids in our ministry or in our groups that, maybe they are not at the spiritual level of the biggest, leaders in the church, So we have to move through all these different territories and manage all these peoples. And I think back to Moses, like you brought up Moses, Jonathan. I think he's a great example because Moses, he was a great man of God, but even there was a time in his life where he needed help. He was cuando los israelitas estaban en batalla, el pueblo de Israel, they were fighting and he had to put his hands up, right? He has to put his hands up so that they could win. And there came a time where he started getting weak and his hands started coming down. And what happened then? He needed the help of his team. He needed the help of the people around him. He needed the help of Aaron and Jur to come up and hold his hands up so that they can win. And there's times in our life when we have all these different tasks and we're spreading ourselves out thin, it's going to be tiring. We could be los ministros más poderosos and we can be in constant, prayer and constant search of God, but we're in this body. And I think it's kind of funny because most of you guys know me for a long time. Like I know Jonathan's known me for a lot, since I was a teenager. And growing up, I kind of way too long. When I was growing up, I kind of had this thing called it's very prominent in the younger crowd. But I used to be kind of like I had like an invincible complexity. Like nothing could hurt me. I was like I like to play sports, I like to run. I would never get hurt, and I thought I was going to live forever, and I'm kind of immortal. I was like, nothing's going to hurt me type of thing, right? And I remember that one time we had this big, youth service, and the pastor or the person that was kind of presenting the sermon, that opportunity, he read in Ecclesiastes 12. And there was this thing stuck in my mind, and it's been in my mind ever since then. It's always comes up to memory, where it talks about cuando los fuertes se encorvan. Like when the strong, they kind of lose their strength. And in my mind, I'm like, there's gonna be a time where I'm not that strong. because I am human. Mis fuerzas no van a ser suficiente. And dude, like that gave me nightmares for a long time. I was like, man, I'm not always gonna be, and it's happening now, man. I came into my 30s, and sometimes I wake up in the morning and my knees are like clicking, my back hurts, my shoulder hurts, and I'm coming to that time where it's like I'm not who I used to be, and I need the help of my team around me. And I think there's a big challenge in kind of managing that. And I kind of enjoy it now, but back in the day, it was a little bit more difficult. When you feel like you want to do something special, when you feel ese gozo and you feel that passion and you're giving it your all and you're playing your best and you're singing your best and you're doing this up there, and then you look at the people around you and perhaps you don't have that backup, and sometimes it could become a struggle because you're not. I feel like sometimes we're not doing our best as leaders because we're focusing on ourselves, and we have to worry about the group as a whole. And I think it's very important to always remember to rely on those people around us.
Dude, that's
Have those add-ons, have those drawers that could come up and help you in times of when your strength isn't always there.
Are you 30 already? I didn't know.
I'm 30, man. Yeah.
you look 15 right now, so it's
3-0.
kind of weird.
Santo.
No, you know what? That's something great that you mentioned right now, dude. It's like whenever Moses needed his hands lifted up, they were winning, right? So sometimes a lot of people do, like, a lot of people, right, tell you that whenever you feel tired is because you're doing something wrong, right? But in this case, we see the example of like Moses, the Israelites fighting that battle, and they're winning, but literally Moses' hands cannot be kept up any longer, and they're winning. It was something good happening, but it just comes down to the point of what you said. We're human, right? We're human, and we're all struggling, and we're not perfect, and we're gonna get tired eventually, right? So we need to find whatever renews your strength, like Christian was saying, right? Whatever is gonna spice up your relationship with the Lord again, whatever is gonna give you that extra boost of strength that you need, right? There's a verse that says, "Los jóvenes se cansan y no tienen fuerzas," right? So like even young people get tired, right? Pero las fuerzas, we have to receive them from the Lord, right? So that's a really good point you made there with Moses, man. Like we all need also people to help us out. And I think in another podcast, we're going to talk about...
And I would almost argue, and I talked... Sorry.
No, it's all good. No, it's all good. Yeah, thanks for interrupting me, man. I forgot what I was saying. No, I'm just kidding. No. I was just going to say that...
There's a delay, so I thought there was a little bit of a pause.
Yeah. I'm hearing that delay as well. But no. But I was just going to say that there's another podcast that I've been talking to Levi about that I want to talk to a friend of mine that is really good with, creating more people within your church to be the people to help you out. And Exar knows this person too, so I know it's going to be a blessing in the future. We're going to schedule that for a different podcast, but I think that's really important too, because we also get tired because we're the only ones doing everything, right? But that shouldn't be the case. There should be more people doing things, right? And but how do you create these people? I think that's a really important topic to touch on. But go back to you, Exar. Sorry.
No, ya también me quitaste la inspiración.
All right, so we're about to finish up then.
No, and here's one thing, Jonathan, that I was actually kind of reading, and correct me if I'm wrong, or I'd be interested to have anybody's take here about this situation. But I was reading a part when Jesus is the night before he's about to be entregado, and he's in el monte orando, and he comes down and he sees los discípulos, and he kind of gets onto them, right? And he's like, no han podido orar ni aunque sea una hora conmigo, And I read that, and I sense like some kind of frustration in Jesus in that instance. And in my mind, I'm like, does Jesus really need the prayers of los discípulos in that instance? Do you think he really needed that? And I was like, I understand, like, he didn't need it, but I think it's very important in that instance to see the weight and the importance of having a team around you that's working or doing the same thing. You know, Jesus didn't need their prayers, but he came down. He was kind of like almost frustrated, and I want to say like it was a time in his life where he was feeling a little bit, you know, I don't want to say weak, but there was a lot going on, and it was tough, and he was going through this tough time, y esta prueba, and then to see the people around him not really backing him up in a sense, I think that we've all kind of been through that as well, where our team perhaps isn't always on the same level that we are on the same frequency, and I think it's very important for us to you know communicate the message or the vision to our team. You know, as leaders, anyways. We were not too long ago we had a sermon at our church where our pastor was talking about the el caminar del pueblo de Dios en el desierto. You know, after they were liberated from Egypt. You know, some studies show that they could have, you know, walked the whole desert and gone to Canaan. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like 7 days. Like if they were to just go from point A to point B, it should have been a journey that took 7 days. But then there's like 40 years later and they're still not there, you know? It's like what happened there? And I think like it's when there's like no vision or there's no direction, there's no campus or something that's leading you, no compass, sorry, no compass that's leading you to a certain area. And a lot of times our prayer teams are going through this, you know, there's no vision, there's nothing we're like, hermanos, this is the vision of this team. This is what we're trying to do as a worship team. This is our purpose. And a lot of times, you know, we have kids in our teams that perhaps they don't know that. They're just there because they like to play the drums, they like to play the piano or the bass, and they don't understand like this is what we're trying to do as a group. And I think that if we lose that vision and if we don't have the support of our team, we're going to be roaming, and our destination we're never going to get there. You know, I'm not sure if you guys have anything to talk about that, but I was reading that and it was just something that really stuck out to me. Is like there could be a point in our ministry where we're just going in circles because primero, we're not unidos. Segundo, because there's no direction, there's no vision.
Christian, what do you think about that?
I think direction and vision are crucial, and not only that. I think that's crucial in every aspect of life. Successful businesses go by having a mission statement and goals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see
Mm-hmm.
why it's going to be different by building a team inside the church. But it makes me think. You were telling the story about Jesus in the Gethsemane
Mm-hmm.
garden, and how he was waiting for his disciples to pray with him, but at the end of the day, he still fulfilled his calling, his mission here. It makes me wonder if us. So this is me just wondering and laying it out there for you to comment as well. That do leaders uh, still have to fulfill their calling and you know goal or mission, even though they don't get the support they're expecting? It makes me wonder because, um, I was having this conversation with my dad the other day, and I told him like I really don't know how you do this because sometimes I feel like you're alone. It makes me think that you're pretty lonely most of the time. Like being a pastor is so difficult, uh, right? And he says like, well, it is. It is pretty lonely in being a pastor, but it's needed because that's the way I force myself to have alone time with God. So it made me think like, oh man, so this is tough. Being a leader, being a pastor, being a worship leader, whatever, in a position where you're leading someone, you're gonna have a lot of situations in where you're gonna be left alone, and you want to push everyone. You want to have everyone to follow your vision, your goals. Realistically, most of the time that's not going to happen because again you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with sin, you're dealing with emotions, and there's no commitment or whatever. Do you still as a leader have to keep pushing because that's your role, that is your calling, like
Mm.
Jesus in the Gethsemane garden? Even though the disciples were not supporting him, he still went to the cross. That didn't stop him from going to the cross for us. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking, what do you guys think?
I think definitely that's been my motivation, and what I remember receiving um, advice from my dad on that is es de que me decía, vos Levi, dice, todos pueden abandonar, pero tú no puedes. Porque dice Lucas 9:62 que aquel que después de poner la mano en el arado dice y mira para atrás, no es apto, dice, para el reino de Dios. Todos pueden abandonar, pero tú no puedes. And something that's difficult, something difficult to apply when you are going through that frustration of you know where you want to go, and you have a heart for it, a love for it, and you're willing to give up everything, and you do, and your team doesn't respond or doesn't have that same mentality. And what's motivated me is just that simple. I can't let go. Everybody else can let go of it, but I can't. Because why? Because I can't. I got to recognize that if I'm in this position, is because my calling is different. And it's just as simple as that. Because it's needed. I need to be there for, not because the church depends on me, not with the mentality that, because I think that's a bad, really bad mentality to have. If I'm not there, then the church is not going to function. If I'm not there, el Señor no va a descender, because the church or ministry is not dependent on you, on your talent, on your ability. You're there because you need to be there. Because if I want to partake in the kingdom, then I need to participate in the kingdom here. And so I would end saying by this, going back to the figura that we were giving with Moses and los dos varones que le fueron a levantar las manos. I just think it's amazing that, the strength was found when Moses had the support. And the figure here is, the motion here was lifting his hands. But lifting your hands is also a symbol, es figura de rendición, of surrender. So I would say I find my strength in my surrender. I find my strength when I surrender.
I think we're gonna be wrapping up this podcast in a bit, but before that, I just want to tell everyone who's listening to this episode, probably not tell, but ask you the question. Even you guys, I'm gonna ask this question: is our God a boring God? Is our God a frustrating God? I think not. I think he's never been a boring and frustrating God. Like if you look around his creation, there's variety. There's diversity. There's colors. There's different creations. The word says his mercy is his mercies are new every morning. There's always something new in our relationship with God. So I think at some point if we start feeling tired and like Exar was saying, we need help from others. I think that's very valid. But I going back to our God, maybe there's something wrong within us first. I will say, let's look inwards first and see what's going on inside. Are we looking for something specific for our own gains? Are there goals in our lives, in our minds that we are setting for ourselves and God is not setting for ourselves? Because that happens a lot. Maybe I have to do this. I have to do this other thing, and we're doing 3-4 different things at the same time, and that's because God needs me. But maybe God has not asked us to do anything yet. Maybe just one thing, and we're doing 3 or 4 different things, thinking He's asking for us to do those things. So again, I think in our relationship with God, He is the most balanced part of a relationship. He's graceful. Like, just again, look around. I don't know, man. Like, look at the animals He's created. Look at the monkeys. I don't know if that's funny to you, man. For me, I crack up. Like, look at baboons, man. Our God is a graceful God. He has a sense of humor. There's no way you can get bored or frustrated or tired. So again, let's look inwards. Let's see if we're doing something we're not supposed to. Let's see if we're putting burdens on ourselves that we're not supposed to first. Like, again, I'm a strong believer in this. Do not start something until God tells you to start something. Otherwise, it's your goal. It's your burden. You want to do this, and then God is going to give you strength at some point. But you got to realize: is this something really God needs for me to do, or is it something I want to accomplish? So that's all I got to say. And I don't know what you guys think. Are we ready to wrap up?
Yeah, I was gonna let XR give some final thoughts on that.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. You bring up a great point, and this podcast, in a sense, it's made me realize like a lot of things that we weighed in, and the more I think about it, the more I think that it's definitely important, your spiritual life and your individual relationship with God. But also, in hearing us talk about, being part of the worship team, I think it's very important for us to not think of it as a burden.
Amen.
When we were younger, I know when the first time I got up and I played the drums, the first time I got up and I played the bass, there was a certain excitement about what I was doing. And I was very passionate about it. And it was truly a privilege. Along the way, along, my walk in life and, through different circumstances, there was times where I lost that. Why did I lose that? What happened in the life around me? And I think it's very important for us to go back to that point where we're looking forward to our next service, whether it be
Mm.
remembering God's praises every day. If we challenge ourselves to at least once a day sit down in our studio, in our homes, somewhere private, and just think about the goodness of God and all the things that He's done for us, I bet you that the next praise will be even better. And not only that, I think it's also important to think about what we talked about earlier, nuestras ayudas,
Mm.
nuestro grupo. I know that, a lot of this is individual, our relationship with Christ is individual, but let's be honest, the work is a lot easier when you have a group as a whole doing it. And there's no better way to praise a God when you have the whole church, the whole group behind you. And I think it's very important to, build those supports around you. And if they're not there, I think we can ourselves be a tool. I'm a very big believer that the biggest, the most, the most impactful way to build someone up or the people around you is through your own testimony. If I go
Mm.
up there and I praise God and I show people like this is the God that I praise because He's been good, that's going to contaminate and not contaminate, but that's going to contagiar a los demás, ¿verdad?
Right,
That's going
right,
to,
right.
light fires here, light fires there, and then your
Contagious.
whole team will
Mm.
also be like, hey, we're not just up here haciendo ruido, we're up here worshiping a God and we're up here praising. And I think as leaders, it's very important for us to, of course, think about our individual relationship with God and keep nurturing that, but also worry about our team, make sure that they see what we're doing. Make sure that they know the vision, that they know the destination, that they know what nuestro lema is. What are we doing up here as a team? We're worshiping God. Do you know this God? You know? And I mean, we work with so many young kids in our church, and I know that they're still trying to figure it out or still trying to, find God. I think it's within us to be like, hey, maybe you don't know him like I do, but let me show you who he is to me, anyways. And through our worship, through our praise, through the way that we walk every day, we can be an example to them so that they, in turn, could learn to worship as well.
Yeah, totally, man. That's great. And okay, guys, so we're about to wrap up. I just want to finish up and leave you with this two thoughts. The first one is, the foolish is the one who doesn't do what is asked of him, but the prideful is the one who does things that no one asked him to do. And sometimes we end up doing both. Sometimes the Lord asks us to do something and we don't do it. That's just foolish, right? And sometimes the Lord has not asked us to do something and we do it anyway, and that's just being prideful. So the reason I'm saying that is because sometimes we have to understand our calling, and sometimes we are doing things that the Lord has not asked us to do, and we're doing them out of our own energy, our own will, I guess, and that's why we get tired, because we're not being backed up by the Lord who asked us to do something, right? And the second thought that I want to leave you with is a quote actually from Marvin Tovar. We had an episode with him a few weeks ago, and dude, whenever he said that, it really struck me, man. He said, "Yo no sirvo al Señor por la paga, yo lo sirvo por la deuda," right? So that means in English, guys,
Mm.
I don't serve the Lord because I get for the wages.
Poderoso.
Yeah, yeah, I
But
serve
also,
him because I owe him, and that's what we need to keep in
The
mind every
debt.
time you
Yep.
go into the el altar and you start serving. Remember that you're not doing it to get anything out of it. It's because you owe him everything that you're doing this.
Mm.
And it's just, man, whenever if you understand that in your mind, I promise you, you will not be burdened by what you're doing anymore, because you're not doing to get not even to improve your relationship with the Lord. You're doing it because you owe Him every single thing that you have. So keep that in mind. We'll be praying for you. If you want to leave a comment down below, if you need a prayer request, they're always welcome. Always, if you have a question, like we said, you can always email us as well at thehowpodcast1@gmail.com. And make sure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast feed, and you like it and you share it with your friends that are also in the worship team, because we want this conversations to be able to reach as many people as possible, so it can be a blessing for them as well. So we want to thank you. We want to thank Exar as well for his time and his for him agreeing to be with us today. Thank you, Levi and Christian. God bless you guys, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.